Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon session of Reimagining Religious Freedom, Rights, Responsibilities, and Respect. We've had an incredibly full day of information and engagement and learning about our rights through the lens and experiences of many different communities, looking at what is our responsibility to protecting those rights and taking action. And so now we'll have the opportunity to hear from a panel. In this session, we'll talk about respect and specifically talking about initiatives where people of multi-faith or diverse worldviews are working together to reimagine pluralism, justice, and religious freedom. And I'm so honored that we have with us today Dr. Corey D.B. Walker, who will be our moderator for today's or this afternoon session. But before we do, as you have known starting yesterday, every session built upon the next one. It was critically important and intentional, the ways in which we structured this Religious Freedom Institute. And one of the things I want to remind you is that there is an opportunity tomorrow for you to engage more deeply in taking action and mobilizing on these issues. And it could be any one of the issues that we talked about today, but there's an advocacy training that's taking place tomorrow at 10 a.m. But at the same time, one of our sponsors, the First Amendment Museum, is offering a talkback session where you can learn more about the work that they're doing at their museum to educate people in how to live your freedoms. So what I would like to do is take a moment to play this quick video so you can get a better understanding of the work that they do at the First Amendment Museum.
I'm Christian Coates, CEO of the First Amendment Museum in Augusta, Maine. The First Amendment Museum is proud to be a sponsor of the 2022 Religious Freedom Mobile Institute. Religious freedom is the first of 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment. Initially conceived as the liberty of conscience, it protects our ability to believe, or to think, or to imagine whatever we care to. As we form our more perfect union, religious freedom protects our ability to think new thoughts that might threaten the status quo. And in that way, it lies at the very root of our democracy. The First Amendment protects the religious freedom of all Americans. And it's through important conversations, such as those that will happen at this institute, that our religious freedom, our freedom of conscience, flourishes. The First Amendment Museum is a nonpartisan nonprofit that inspires all of us to live our freedoms, to exercise our religious freedom, as well as our freedoms of speech, press, assembly, and petition. We believe that when more people exercise their freedoms, when they participate in their democracy, our democracy thrives. So thank you for joining this conversation, for attending this institute, and for participating in the dialogue of forming a more perfect union. When you have a few minutes, you might take a look at firstamendmentmuseum.org to find some helpful resources. And while you're there, please leave a donation if you can. Thanks. We hope you find the Institute engaging and impactful.
So we want to thank the First Amendment Museum and all of our sponsors that have supported this incredible institute. We've spotlighted our sponsors on a slide earlier today, and we're grateful for the contributions of each of those organizations, as you can see on the screen before you. And so now let's get down to this conversation. So I want to introduce my friend and my colleague, Dr. Corey D.B. Walker. He is the Wake Forest Professor of the Humanities in the Department of English and Interdisciplinary Humanities Program, and the inaugural director of the program in African American Studies at Wake Forest University. And it was recently announced that Dr. Walker is now the new interim dean of the Wake Forest School of Divinity. Congratulations, Dr. Walker. Dr. Walker is an author and an editor of several books that he has published, over 60 articles, essays, and book chapters in a wide variety of scholarly journals and publications. His research and teaching interest spans the areas of Africana philosophy, critical theory, ethics, and religion and American public life. He is currently completing his next book, Disciple of Nonviolence, Wyatt T. Walker and the Struggle for the Soul of Democracy, to be published by the University of Virginia Press. So I'd like to bring to the screen now my friend, my colleague, board member, Dr. Corey D.B. Walker. Thank you for moderating this conversation.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and thank you for inviting me to this important set of conversations, and most importantly, a training that will enable individuals to live out religious freedom in the everyday life, and building and broadening our democracy, and toward creating a more just and equitable world. Today's conversation builds on the previous conversations around Christian nationalism, around rights and responsibilities. The idea of respect undergirds each of these areas. Lack of respect gives rise to forms of nationalism and vicious forms of authoritarianism, as well as vicious forms of ethnocentrism. The undergirding of rights, undergirding of respect, enables us to respect individual rights, and also to begin to institutionalize broader rights for individuals as well as groups within various polities, and also within our global society. The idea of responsibility is intertwined with respect in the ways in which, if we do not respect one another, then we lack a responsibility to that individual or to that other group. And when we think about respect, we cannot have religious freedom within a pluralist democracy and within a pluralist world without respecting the views, the religious modalities, as well as the respecting individual persons and the worth, value, and dignity of the totality of their personhood without respect. So today's conversation enables us to really grab hold onto all of our previous conversations, draw a bright thread through them, and then begin to position us to take off for tomorrow to begin to live out these ideas. I'm glad to be joined by four dear friends in this conversation: Harmeet, PJ, Brad, as well as Becca. They'll each bring a unique perspective. They'll each undergird how we have to not only reimagine religious freedom, but we also have to reimagine respect in a deep and profound sense in order to capture the different valences and understandings that we're attempting to articulate today. So let's begin first with Harmeet. Harmeet is an interfaith educator, performing artist, public scholar, and zine maker. They currently serve as program manager at Interfaith America, instructor at the Moxa Arts Dance Company, and editor-in-chief of Faith in Full Color, an interfaith arts zine. Harmeet holds 2 master's degrees from Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York, one in interreligious engagement and the other in religion and society. Their public scholarship focuses on the power of collective liberation in the fight against Islamophobia and anti-LGBTQ hate. Harmeet, talk to us about respect as we reimagine religious freedom.
Hello, everyone. Waheguru ji ka khalsa, Waheguru ji ki fateh. Thank you so much, Dr. Walker, for that generous introduction. I'm so excited to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about my work as an interfaith educator and as a steward of interfaith spaces generally. And I want to talk specifically about the interfaith work that I do towards collective liberation specifically. Interfaith is not just an event or a relationship or a bridge. Interfaith is a modality. It's a way of doing and not just the doing itself. And interfaith leaders invest in interfaith as a modality for their work for many reasons. That could be conflict resolution, education and awareness, strong united governance, trauma-informed healing, the list goes on. My interfaith work specifically centers around collective liberation, the idea that my freedom is tied up in the freedom of every one of these panelists and every one of you watching this panel. Collective liberation calls us to invest in each other's freedom from our own unique experiences of oppression based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, class, caste, and religious, spiritual, or ethical identity. And collective liberation is a monumental task that requires monumental effort from all of us. And we can't approach this work in a singular way because we all don't share a singular experience or a singular identity or even a singular goal. This is a collective project uniting an infinitely diverse community of leaders and organizers, and we all play a unique role that touches a unique part of the community. And all these parts make up the whole of the project of collective liberation. And if you'll just bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen with you. I'd like to introduce you to Deepa Iyer's social change ecosystem. Deepa Iyer is herself a preeminent scholar of sociology and of social change specifically. And in 2018, she released research and findings around this social change ecosystem, in which she understands that the goals and objectives of equity, liberation, justice, and solidarity are reached through the collective work of all of these kinds of people, whether you're a weaver or a guide or a storyteller, a healer, disruptor, caregiver, builder, visionary, frontline responder, or experimenter. Deepa Iyer's model talks about how each of these roles is essential to the work and to reach the goal of equity, liberation, justice, and solidarity. And her model inspired me to think about my role in the interfaith movement for collective liberation. And it made me ask myself, do I play one role or two or more in this movement? How can I make the most of the skills and resources available to me to make as significant an impact as possible in the journey towards collective liberation? This, by the way, is often referred to as an asset-based approach to problem solving, in which we reflect on how what we have is what we need to do the work. And there are many scholars who have done sociological work around asset framing, including Trabian Shorters, whose work I recommend everyone look at after today's presentation. And I'd like to say that this approach has been utilized among communities of color and working class communities around the world for time immemorial. But when I think about what I bring to the table, I think about my relationships with the arts community, with queer and trans faith leaders, and with students and educators at colleges and universities around the country. In the summer of 2020, I launched an independent arts publication called Faith in Full Color. This publication is an art zine that gives artists from historically excluded faith communities the opportunity to express their faithful perspectives on important social issues. We have 2 volumes out so far, one on race and justice and the other on land and space. And this project came out of my observation that the arts communities that I was involved in as a dancer and a dance teacher were starting to intersect significantly with the faith-based social justice communities I was entering into as a graduate student. And the goal of this zine has been to invite artists to contribute work, engage each other's work, and for readers to understand how to spiritually mobilize around critical issues from many different lenses. And we've had contributors speaking from Muslim, Indigenous, Mormon, secular, and many other religious, spiritual, and ethical perspectives to help draw these connections to the work, this work that unites us in unexpected ways. I will say, as noted on the slide, that both volumes of the zine are totally free to download and to consume. And our Instagram account is @faithinfullcolor, which is where you can find the downloadable links for these zines if you're ever interested to read them. Another really critical way that I have been engaging in collective liberation through an interfaith lens is through dance, and my dance practice that has been a huge part of my life for almost 20 years. Starting the Faith in Full Color zine required me to reflect on my commitments as an artist to the project of collective liberation. I had to pause and ask myself, am I using all the skills and resources I have as an artist and as a dancer to contribute to the growth of this movement? And that was a really tough question for me to sit with, because I use dance as a self-care activity. So part of me was very resistant to welcome the discomfort and pain of the reality of oppression into my self-care practice. But as a trained dancer of 16 years and as a dance teacher of 10 years, I already knew that part of my responsibility as a professional and as an educator of dance is that I needed to pay attention to how my dance practice can inform my liberative interfaith work. And as a result, I've started developing dance workshops that integrate not only the embodied elements of dance with the histories, but with the histories of these dance forms as well. I teach a couple of different forms of South Asian folk and classical dance. One is called Bhangra. It originates from the Punjab region of South Asia. And the other is Kathak. It's a form of classical dance that actually has its roots in Persia. And I noticed that these forms, as I started to dig into their histories, are rooted in villages and communities in South Asia identified as caste oppressed, and in some cases are tribal communities. But British colonialism and Hindu nationalism have sanitized or completely erased these histories. And part of my practice as a dance educator is to excavate those lost histories for my students and my peers so that we can truly honor the lineages of Dalit, Adivasi, and other severely marginalized South Asian communities that have had their art forms stolen from them. And just a quick taste of what these workshops look and feel like. These pictures that you're seeing on the screen are from a workshop I held at my alma mater, Union Theological Seminary, around the roots of Bhangra dance and farming practices in Punjab, and how anti-capitalist movements recently in that same region of the world are connected closely to embodied celebration of the earth and of nourishment. And finally, a key part of the project of collective liberation for me is public access to knowledge. I have been extremely privileged to have the opportunity to attend graduate school and study interfaith in a rigorous academic setting. It's never lost on me that I hold a great deal of privileged knowledge about interfaith cooperation, about community building, and about systems of oppression. And it's my job to close the knowledge gap as much as possible. I do that in my capacity as an educator by making the knowledge that I hold as accessible as possible. I do that through opportunities like this panel, which are meant specifically to help transmit knowledge. I do that through lectures and dialogue facilitation at my alma mater, Union Theological Seminary. I do that through what some folks call public scholarship, which is essentially communicating my research for a public audience in a way that's digestible and understandable for folks of many different levels of educational attainment. And I do that in my capacity as program manager at Interfaith America, formerly called Interfaith Youth Corps, where I develop curricula and programs for college students and educators geared to help them develop and hone their interfaith leadership skills. And then on this slide, although it may seem a little self-serving, I did include some headlines that I was very, very fortunate to produce over the last few years around so some may call fringe parts of the communities that are being addressed here, whether those are South Asian Americans hoping to overcome intergenerational trauma to collectively organize against Islamophobia, or talking about how the media addresses progressive religious people and how so many of us are erased from those conversations. And my most recent piece, which is very intimately tied to my livelihood, is around building and finding safe spaces for spiritual growth for transgender Sikhs, particularly in America, but also around the world. I'll stop sharing my screen and conclude with just this slight call. What's at the center of my remarks today is an invitation, most of all, perhaps even more pointedly, a request for you all to creatively and expansively think about your work as faith leaders, community leaders, and stewards of interfaith cooperation. Many of us come from communities that have been systemically excluded from negotiations of power. Our ancestors were forced to think creatively in pursuit of their freedom for this reason. And as we look ahead to the midterm elections, to the continuing unfolding of a pandemic that is disabling and killing thousands of Americans every day, and to the great transition that the American empire is undergoing before our eyes, I ask that you give yourself permission to invite creativity and expansion into your work, to sit with the discomfort of who your work is excluding and how you will repair that harm. To know that you have, and we all have, all that we need to liberate ourselves from our oppressors. Thank you so much again for having me here today. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much, Harmeet. Thank you for extending us an invitation to really embrace our interfaith selves and building collective liberation, to building a creative movement that draws on all of our collective commitments, and most importantly, for reminding us the depth and quality of the communities that we inhabit and the resources of those communities to respond to this particular moment in creating a more just and sustainable world. Thank you so much. PJ, we're coming to you next. PJ is a dear friend, and he co-coordinates the Baha'is of the United States Office of Collaboration with Individuals, Organizations, and Agencies in the U.S. engaged in public discourses and policy advocacy directed toward racial justice and racial unity. Prior to joining the office in 2017, PJ worked in ethical culture development for the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, and government relations for national service programs with the Corporation for National and Community Services, and as a caseworker for U.S. Congressperson Chris Van Hollen. He also supported the work of the International Teaching Center at the World Center of the Baha'i Faith in Haifa, Israel. And PJ holds the MED in Human Development and Psychology from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a BA in American Studies from Tufts University. PJ, we've heard the wonderful invitation extended by Harmeet. Step into that space and provide us with your understanding of the theme of respect relative to reimagining religious freedom.
Thank you, Corey. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hopefully y'all can hear me. My internet is telling me I'm unstable, so hopefully it will pull through for the next 10 minutes. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. And I'm so glad that Sabrina invited me to share a little bit about the work that I do on behalf of the Baha'is of the United States. So, because many people may not know what the Baha'i faith is, I'll just note that it's one of the world's youngest religions, global faiths, and the foundational principle behind the Baha'i faith is oneness, the belief that there is one God, that the religions of the world are united and not in conflict with each other, and that humanity is one, that we're one human family, and that spiritual identity is one of our greatest assets. But also the idea, an ancillary idea to that is the idea of unity and diversity, in the sense that the diversity of the human race is actually one of our greatest resources and not a source of division or conflict. So and I wanted to share just this idea of interfaith and respect is really baked into the teachings of the Baha'i faith. It's really sort of guiding it. So I wanted to share two very short quotes that reinforce the concept of oneness that are coming from the sacred writings of the Baha'i faith, and also the idea of interfaith. So these are from the writings of Baha'u'llah. So at one point, Baha'u'llah says that, "Know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times in your hearts how you were created, so that by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be manifest." And that quote really, I think, inspires and guides a lot of my own work, my own way of being in this world. This idea that one should ponder at all times how we are all created from the same dust, and how that flows through our deeds and actions. And then in relation to interfaith, in another place, Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith, he says that we should consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. So from the very foundations of the Baha'i faith, there is this spirit of respect and sense of interfaith fellowship that is really rooted in this idea of our inherent interconnectedness as a human family. And then, I do this work through what is called the Office of Public Affairs. So I represent the American Baha'i community, really, and the work that I do is at the level of discourse. And what I mean by discourse is thinking about the challenges that the world is facing, trying to contribute ideas that may help advance the thinking of humanity that will change the structures of society. And I think that there is, this idea of working at the level of thought and consciousness is actually quite important in a world that is so oriented towards action, right? I think that Harmeet earlier was talking about the importance of knowledge and the creation of knowledge. And I think that is a longing of the human soul, the human experience, is to be able to participate in that. And one way we think about learning in our office is that learning advances through a process of action and reflection. And that the two really reinforce each other, and that there is an intimate connection between language, thought, and consciousness and the action that we take in the world. And so I think a lot of the work that our office is engaged in is trying to create spaces for reflection, especially among people who are working at the level of action, right? Who probably don't have a lot of time to reflect. And so one of the joys of my work is to be able to provide those kind of spaces for people, or co-create those spaces with people who are interested in taking a step back from the urgency of the moment and think about, what are the deeper questions that are underpinning the issues that they're working along. So that sort of leads me to what I wanted to share a little bit about today, which is something called the Dialogue on Faith and Race. So this is an initiative our office started about five and a half years ago, almost 6 years ago now. And we hosted in collaboration with a colleague who works at the Peace and Justice Studies Department at Catholic University, who we met a number of years ago and found interest in this. And I think this started at a time when it felt like, it's probably 2017, 2016, when it just felt like the polarization in the country was really increasing at a rapid rate. And the sort of talking past one another and sort of just lack of general desire to understand each other seemed to be ramping up. And so we thought, and also we felt like there was this unique role that religion could play in the question, especially in one of the areas that I follow is the question of racial justice and unity. And so there was a question about, well, what could we create a space where the role of the faith community and the role of religion in the elimination of racism could be explored in some depth. And so we decided to convene this dialogue space. And I think really one of the ways that we pursued it was thinking about it as a way in which those people who are working in national faith-based organizations can come together and explore some of the deeper questions that are underpinning their work. And the way that we decided to format the space was around sort of a discussion paper that would explore some theme related to the question of the role of religion and faith communities in the elimination of racism. And I think that another aspect of that framing of the discussion space that we recognized was that religion has also been one of the leading reasons for this increase of lack of racial justice historically in the United States. Has been used as a tool of oppression. I think there's this sort of capacity in religion to divide, to further divide, but there is this also capacity of religion to transcend. And so we wanted to explore the way that those two things interacted. And I think that the discussion papers sort of looked at it from both angles and allowed us to look at both sides of that question. And I think that another aspect of the dialogue that was so important, and this maybe gets at the question of respect, was because we were intentionally trying to bring people of different racial and religious backgrounds, and I should say ages too. There was quite a broad diversity of people present in this space over the years. That you have to really think about what are the conditions how do you create the right conditions, the right type of environment that will allow people to really explore these questions that are so deep in people's identity. And that can be the source of such great sensitivity and division and really like emotion and trauma that can be triggering issues. So how do you actually create an environment that brings such diversity together to have a very profound conversation? And so we took time to also develop very thoughtfully sort of, we call them discussion parameters. And so in that space, we really emphasized that we were trying to create a space of shared understanding. And that recognize that everybody's experience from all of their different diverse backgrounds was important to be shared. And that this idea that we were searching for common spiritual resources and insights on which to draw as we address the moral and practical issues before us was going to take priority over the sort of comparison and judging of different religious practices. We wanted to try and transcend this idea of focusing on difference and trying to find the commonality between each other's experiences. And that this was not for attribution, so allowing people to really speak with candor. And then I think that we also had a note about current events. I think that it's very easy to get sort of caught up in the questions of the moment. But we tried to sort of say the questions we're exploring have predated the current moment and will probably persist for a period ahead of us. So we wanted to try and elevate beyond just the discussions of the moment. And I think that has proven really useful. So I realized I'm quickly running out of time. So I want to just say two last things before I wrap up. One is that as we've worked through this process over the last 5 years, and there's probably about, I don't know, 25 to 30 organizations, national faith-based organizations that participate in the dialogue on faith and race. We've tried to orient our thinking. It's a participatory collaborative group. And we've started to orient our thinking around building capacity in the participants, that this space isn't the end in of itself, that this space is one in which we actually are developing the capacity to do something similar in other contexts, to bring people together across lines of difference, to have very challenging conversations about the role of religion in eliminating racism. And so we very intentionally put this question out to the group and been asking sort of along the way, like, how is this experience helping you in your own work? And what are opportunities that you see in your own work to be able to carry this forward into other spaces? And so one person who, for example, is Black Muslim, has been able to take some of the tools that we've developed in the dialogue to the Muslim community to have more direct conversations about anti-Black racism. So like, just to share an example of how this is sort of leading forward into other areas of endeavor. And then the final thing, and I want to add this to the chat and just leave it for you all to have as a resource. 1 second here. Let's see if this works. is, so we developed, so after 5 years of exploration and study, conversation and deepening together, and really building sense of trust and community, we were able to develop a statement, a multi-faith statement that really tried to distill 5 years of a journey together, sort of exploring this question of what is the role that the faith, community, and religion can play in eliminating racism. And I offer it to you. It's a statement, but it's embedded with many questions to invite people in. And so right now, the dialogue participants are in a process of taking the statement and sharing it in other contexts with other people and getting feedback on it and seeing if this is useful for others to think about how to have this type of conversation. And we're going to be reflecting in a few months on our experiences to generate more learning about what do we learn, to generate learning of how to bring people together in this way. So I'm sharing it with you, and I invite everyone to take time to read it and reach out to me and share your thoughts with me on this. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the dialogue space, you're also welcome to reach out to me. I will try and get this uploaded in the chat. In the meantime, I will turn it back over to Corey.
Thank you so much, PJ. You really entered the space that was opened up by Harmeet to remind us that the resources that we have, the religious resources that we have, are not only challenges, they not only represent challenges, but they are also rich opportunities for us to really draw from these deep wells of tradition, to begin to mobilize and organize ourselves in new ways, to begin to expand our imaginations, and most importantly, to begin to think beyond the horizon of the given, to begin to inhabit new spaces such that the fullness of who we are and our full humanity can be welcomed. And that welcoming is part and parcel of a deep respect for the worth, value, and dignity of each individual. Thank you so much, PJ. Next, we'll have our good friend Becca join us. And Becca works as Shoulder to Shoulder's Operations and Administrative Associate. In addition to working with Shoulder to Shoulder, Becca works with Peace Catalyst International in the Washington, D.C. area, building bridges between evangelical Christian and Muslim communities, and helping to equip and empower Christians and others to become peace builders in their communities. She holds a Master of Arts in International Peace and Conflict Resolution and a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies from the School of International Service at American University. Becca continues to have a passion for countering all forms of oppression and discrimination, including anti-Muslim discrimination, and is actively involved in several organizations working towards that end in the U.S. and abroad. Becca, join us and offer us your thoughts on respect, reimagining religious freedom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker, for your introduction.
Move around.
Sorry, my apologies. The Shoulder to Shoulder campaign is a national multi-faith coalition, and we're focused on countering anti-Muslim discrimination, hatred, and violence in America. And as we know, Christian nationalism is, one of the single biggest threats to religious freedom nationally today, and it's an ideology that definitely feeds into and exacerbates anti-Muslim discrimination and violence, in addition to, of course, these other forms of racism and discrimination. So respect within this context, for us, it's the idea of all people being treated equally with dignity, including Muslims and others who are experiencing oppression and discrimination. And the hope that we would see a world where that no longer exists. The change that Shoulder to Shoulder is pursuing for countering anti-Muslim discrimination and violence is through equipping and empowering faith leaders and community members to address this within their own communities through learning, shared experiences of learning and education, through resources, the main way that we equip and train faith leaders is through our Faith Over Fear trainings. And we actually just launched our virtual Faith Over Fear course on religionandpubliclife.org, which I will share the link to in the chat. And that resource goes through analyzing Islamophobia and anti-Muslim discrimination, anti-Muslim bigotry in the US through examining the historical context, as well as understanding the contemporary challenges. It equips participants to communicate for change by learning how to transform a demeaning culture filled with untruthful and harmful notions by empowering communities to make meaning of their shared values based on accurate and generative language. And it also equips participants to implement engagement strategies by utilizing proven tactics to dilute anti-Muslim bigotry while promoting peaceful coexistence. So as we think about respect, we are looking to help equip people in their communities to not only promote that respect, but to actually create transformation so that their fellow community members can also respect their Muslim neighbors and others as well. So one of the ways that this also equips people is by improving skills and confidence to speak against anti-Muslim rhetoric and discrimination. It's not, anti-Muslim bigotry is not just theoretical. There is widespread misinformation and fear that leads to hate crimes, vandalism, bullying, and other forms of violence. And so what Faith Over Fear does is it helps to improve skills and confidence to speak against this, as well as increasing in community discussions to effectively counter that within their communities, and also building stronger local multi-religious networks. So through this work, this is where we believe that we can see transformation and people moving towards respect, which goes beyond, as we know, it's not just acceptance or tolerance, but respect is affirming people for who they are and how they identify. And we believe that through this work, we can and we have seen real transformation within faith communities beyond just leaders, but going through to their communities that they're leading as well. And I want to just also put this forth to you all that if this is an issue that's affecting your community, we would encourage you to become a part of our Faith Over Fear virtual network and not only take this course, but reach out to us to participate in a virtual cohort. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Cassandra Lawrence, who's also on our team. Our executive director, Nina Fernando, just had her second child recently, which we are celebrating. And so she'll be returning at the beginning of 2023. And in the meantime, if this is something that you feel would be a resource for you, please do reach out. We would love to work with you to counter that anti-Muslim discrimination in your communities. So I'll hand it back over to Dr. Walker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becca. And thank you for really underscoring that the idea of respect, really the practice and position of respect, must eschew those modes of fearing and welcome and actually position oneself to welcome that which is other. And respect at its best is a practice of risk-taking and a practice of transformation. So thank you so much, Becca, for offering that to us. And really this space, Harmeet, that you opened up and invited us into today has just been very generative of some rich ideas coming from yourself, from PJ, and from Becca to remind us of how respect in a modality of plenitude opens up new ways of thinking about the rich and wonderful resources we have to then respond to deepening this idea of religious freedom and in reimagining our world. I'm so glad to welcome a dear friend and true comrade in this endeavor, the Reverend Dr. Brad R. Braxton. Brad and I share a deep friendship, and it's always good to be in conversation with Brad. And I know he will continue to expand this space that Harmeet opened for us. And in walking through that space will enable us to uncover rich regimes of new forms of respect and reimagining religious freedom. Brad Braxton is president and professor of public theology at Chicago Theological Seminary, a progressive graduate school of theological education known for its leadership in social justice and interfaith engagement. He is also the senior program advisor for Creative Encounters, Living Religions in the United States, the 2023 Smithsonian Folklife Festival on Religious Diversity, and he's founding senior pastor of the Open Church, an inclusive congregation in Baltimore, Maryland, committed to social justice activism, LGBTQ equality, and interfaith collaboration. He holds a PhD in New Testament Studies from Emory University, where he was the George W. Woodruff Fellow, a master's degree in theology from the University of Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and a BA degree in religious studies from the University of Virginia, where he was a Jefferson Scholar and a member of Phi Beta Kappa. Dr. Braxton is the author of several scholarly books exploring the intersection of religion and social justice. His book, No Longer Slaves, Galatians, and African American Experience, and his book, Preaching Paul, are frequently used in seminary courses throughout the nation. Beacon Press will publish next year a master class on being human, a Black Christian and Black secular humanist on religion, race, and justice, which he co-authored with noted secular humanist Anthony Penn. The book explores the differences and similarities between Black religious and Black secular communities and the ongoing struggle for social justice. Additionally, Fortress Press will publish next year Open, Unorthodox Thoughts on God and Community, a collection of essays and sermons examining religion from a progressive perspective. Brad, talk to us and continue to expand that space on respect, reimagining religious freedom.
Thank you, Dr. Walker and Dr. Dent, for the invitation to be a part of this conversation, and what a delight to join with my fellow panelists. I bring you greetings on behalf of Chicago Theological Seminary and the Open Church of Maryland. In our instructions, even before we came on to the broadcast, we literally were told to bring some homiletical juice to this conversation. And of course, I have taught homiletics, the art and science of preaching, for decades now in seminaries and divinity schools. So taking seriously the assignment that was given to me and us, I want to talk for just a few fleeting moments today about bone deep solutions for bone deep problems. I am 53 years old and I wear 53 well. Like I tell people all the time, 53 has never looked as good as it looks on me. And I know you may not believe it as you look at me, but I used to be a serious athlete. In my teens and 20s and 30s, and even in my early 40s, I played a lot of sports all the time, from football to racquetball. And I will never forget that moment, Dr. Walker, when I was on the faculty at Vanderbilt after a serious racquetball match. I felt some real joint problems. I thought maybe I had sprained a muscle, but I wasn't sure. And I will never forget that moment when I went to a sports doctor and he said to me, your genetic bone structure was such that you are going to have joint replacement long before most people have to have it. In other words, he let me know that often we think that the sprains that we have in our body are simply at the superficial level. But he said, no, you have a bone deep problem. And for a bone deep problem, there must be bone deep solutions. I'm proud to say that I did have some joints replaced and I'm back to playing athletics. So I'm trying to let us know that it's very dangerous to try to address structural problems with cosmetic solutions. As I thought about the invitation to be on this panel and where our country and world are today, especially as it relates to religious, spiritual, and ethical traditions, my mind was drawn to those penetrating words in the Hebrew Bible written by the so-called weeping prophet Jeremiah, who in the 8th chapter writes, "For the hurt of my poor people I am hurt. I mourn, and dismay has taken hold of me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why has the health of my poor people not been restored?" It is possible to translate one of the verses that I just read to you. The fracture of my people fractures me. In other words, the prophet centuries ago was saying that this society centuries ago had a bone deep problem, like a fracture, and it needed bone deep solutions. And so as I think about where we are today, I want to be very clear that the bone deep problem plaguing not only the United States, but the world is xenophobia. Plain and simple. A big word for a big problem. Xenophobia. Fanatical fear of the stranger or the other. In Greek, the word xenos means stranger or foreigner or other, and phobos means fear. Xenophobia is fear of the other or fear of people who are different. And we have seen over and over again in our world that sometimes this fear drives people to homicidal and suicidal mania. If we, those of us who are in these religious and spiritual and ethical traditions, are going to make a difference, we have to provide bone deep solutions for these bone deep problems. Jeremiah talked about the balm of Gilead, this plant that had some healing properties to it. When I think about what the balm of Gilead is, what the healing medicine is for us in this day and age, I can say it to you simply. If our bone deep problem is xenophobia, our bone deep solution is social justice. Social justice rooted in a sense of that which is sacred and godly and beautiful and good. I'm talking about restorative justice. Justice, where power is shared among those who are different for the common good. Justice, where the poor and the weak and the oppressed are restored to a full human condition. Justice, where things unlawfully taken are returned and unearned privileges are relinquished. What we need and what our religious, spiritual, and ethical traditions are especially equipped to offer us is access to and ways of offering justice. In particular now, lest you think I'm just opining way up in the sky, let me bring it down on the ground by the pound. There are a few ways in my ministry that I have found justice can be administered for addressing bone deep problems. First, justice in our traditions can come through education. I am so delighted across these decades to have been a part of so many institutions that are offering prophetic, life-altering, society-transforming education. And in particular, I want to talk about the beauty of our traditions educating us on pluralism. Pluralism is a liberating call to uncertainty, to a sense of human and religious limitedness. We need more education that the things that we think we know, certainly and absolutely, sometimes we don't really know certainly or absolutely. In other words, one of the things that I am working a lot on with leaders at Chicago Theological Seminary and at the Open Church and in other places How do we educate the world to embrace pluralism, which ultimately is the embrace of humility? The sense that I will not know everything there is to know about what is good and sacred in the world unless I listen to and learn from you. We need more education on pluralism that teaches us difference is not a problem to be solved. It is an opportunity to be embraced. I look at every one of my sacred siblings, even those with whom I may have profound disagreements, as messengers, people who have something to tell me, people who have something to teach me. There is that old aphorism that I have adapted slightly for gender inclusion. 3 people are my friends: the one who loves me, the one who hates me, and the one who is indifferent to me. The one who loves me teaches me tenderness. The one who hates me teaches me caution. The one who is indifferent to me teaches me self-reliance. 3 people are my friends. What if we educated towards pluralism, towards, as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks called, the dignity of difference, and said that even those with whom we might differ and disagree are friends and messengers? Second, justice comes through agitation, or as my beloved Dean Bill Leonard taught us years ago, provocation. One of the things we need to do in our religious traditions is we need to agitate and provoke even within our own traditions. As a religionist, I say all the time, as a scholar of scripture, I say all the time, there are moments when the Bible misbehaves. There are moments when religion is toxic. We need to call out and agitate and provoke even within our own traditions. We need to say clearly, as a Christian minister, there are forms of Christianity in the land that are an abomination and a desecration to everything that Jesus of Nazareth represented. And we need to say it without apology or hesitation. And often some of the most significant agitation is not with another faith or ethical tradition across the world. It's actually with a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or a spouse across the living room or across the dining room table. Some of the most difficult work we need to do is within our own houses. So there must be education, there must be agitation and provocation. And then finally, because y'all said to close this thing down the best we could, there must be recuperation. Just like my body was only healed by a very trained physician providing a bone deep solution to my bone deep problem, we need the skilled physicians of the spirit to help us recuperate and to help us heal the land. Irrespective of the difficulties of the moment and the maladies in the body politic, I promise you, if we come together as sacred siblings, we can heal the land. That's what this panel is about. That's what this Mobile Institute is about, healing the land. So I say to those who are with us today, make that your fundamental mission, healing the land. Organize your protest with that in mind, healing the land. Lead your services and organizations and your praise and worship services and your moments of contemplation and meditation with that principle in mind, healing the land. Those of us who are educators, teach our courses for this cause, healing the land. Reach out and share the best of your tradition as you learn the best of others' tradition with this in mind, healing the land, not just the school or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque. We need to heal the whole land, not just your community, but the whole land, not just red states or blue states, but the whole land. We have the power within us to do this, not just Democrats, Republicans, or independents, but the whole land. Well, in the words of those prophets, we need to heal the land, y'all, until every valley is exalted, until every mountain and hill is made low, until the crooked places are made straight, and irrespective of the malady in the body politic, we, through education, agitation, and recuperation, have the power within us to heal the land.
Thank you so much, Brad, for an expert way to bring it home for us. And the space truly opened up by Harmeet. You've excavated not only the idea that we can't respond with just a simplistic solution to those bone deep problems, but instead we must call upon those deep resources of our traditions, ourselves, our communities, in order to develop bone deep solutions. This has truly been a wonderful conversation, a conversation underwritten by a deep humility to host those experiences which challenge us. It is a risk-filled endeavor, and in many ways, respect is a risk. Because when we respect the totality of life, we engage in the very possibility of being transformed. And in that transformation, we have the possibility of touching on the beauty of the infinite, which then impinges on our world, and we can create a more just and sustainable planet. Harmeet, PJ, Becca, and Brad, thank you. Thank you so much for expanding our horizons around respect, that it is not just a one-dimensional attribute, but a very practice of risk-taking and the very practice of transformation. It is only through this practice that we can live out religious freedom in a deeply pluralistic world. Thank each of you. Thank you for joining us. And now Dr. Dent will have some instructions for tomorrow.
Wow. Wow. I am speechless, which is rare. I am so grateful to all of you, Dr. Corey D.B. Walker, Harmeet Kamboj, Becca Tyvoll, Dr. Brad Braxton, and PJ Andrews for really pouring of yourselves in this this conversation, this presentation, right? You brought it home. This is what we hoped for. And I hope that each of the participants will go back through the chat real quick and grab those links to where you can learn about the organization, see where you could follow these individuals. It was powerful. This is definitely how you bring a day to a close. There's so many notes. I was writing so many notes here that I am just, it's just, you see where I am right now, but I just want to thank all of you. Tomorrow, well, before we even get to tomorrow, I want to announce, like, at the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation, we believe in all of what was shared in today's conversations. We believe in living our faith or our moral conscience to advance justice issues. And that's not just about talk, it's about walking it and doing that work. And so we're committed to also making sure we make resources available to people in community that have not been connected with some of the people that presented today, for you to learn more and to take action. So I want to announce that on Tuesday, November the 1st, we will be hosting a virtual film screening in partnership with some of our partners that you've seen and heard from in the last 2 days. Wake Forest School of Divinity, the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation at Union Presbyterian Seminary, and Chicago Theological Seminary have partnered with us in offering this virtual film screening about this very important film titled American Heretics, The Politics of the Gospel. We talked a lot about Christian nationalism in the last 2 days, and this film shows in Oklahoma how it really came to life for this for certain cities and towns. What does it look like when we see religious privilege happening in the public square? What is our responsibility? And we talked about that. We talked about that in the last 2 days. So this screening, everyone is invited to join us for this film screening on Tuesday, November the 1st at 6 p.m. If you scan the QR code, it will take you to the Eventbrite page where you can register to attend. And also at the same time, we just wanted to remind you that this event is 1 week before the election. So make sure that you do your responsibility to engage in civic engagement by voting and taking time to look ahead of time, look up your polling place, make sure your registration is correct. All of these things are important, are a part of our responsibilities as individuals. So I'm gonna step off my soapbox as far as that is concerned and say, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. as we will conclude the Religious Freedom Mobile Institute with the advocacy training and a talkback session. We have Andrea Miller with the Center for Common Ground who will be joining us for that session. If you were in our session earlier, you know that Andrea's area of expertise is voting rights and climate justice. And so we're gonna lean in a little bit more to those issues. And then also Maxwell Nashbish, who is with the First Amendment Museum in Augusta, Maine, will tell us a little bit more about the work that the First Amendment Museum has been doing in helping people to live their freedoms and to see what that looks like in your daily lives and in museum education. And so we invite you to join us tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. You will receive a reminder tonight around 6:30. It's automated, so it will come out to you with the link to join us. But again, I want to say thank you to all of our presenters that were here today that shared so deeply. And also I want to thank Vaughn and Robin Ambrose for offering such a moving musical performance in homage to John Coltrane and the work that we're doing surrounding justice. So again, thank you for joining us. This video will be available at a later time if you need to go back and revisit some of the conversation. And we wish you a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.